Hi, this is going to be a video on Lidia's stances. I made another video about Lidia's stances quite a while ago, but it was a much more in-depth explanation into a lot of the theory around how the conditioning works in her stances and how to utilize her stances better. I haven't made a video talking more simply about her stances, what the point of them is, and how to just use them in general, and that's what this video is going to be about since a lot of you have been asking me for it. So you have two moves that go in the horse stance, forward 2 and down back 3. Forward 2 is of course plus on block, down back 3 is launch punishable, but it's going to be plus 7 on hit. Now when you go into this stance, you're plus 5 on block, and that's going to give you a few options. You can do the 1+2 to open your opponent up, although it is a launch punishable low, that's -1 on hit, so it's not very good for just forcing the mix-up. You have the 1, which is going to beat jabs. You have the 3, which is going to beat down jabs. You have the 2, which is an alternate mid to the 3, slightly faster, but it is -10. And you have the 4, which is going to generally be used for opening up opponents who are blocking, puts you in wolf stance, and then it's going to give you another mix-up from wolf stance with the 4 or the 2, or the 1 unless they sidestep right. Now, all in all, the horse mix-up actually isn't very good by itself on paper, and the previous video that I made where I talked about stances, I mainly talked about horse stance and the actual utility of these moves, because it goes quite in depth how you have to think about these moves, how you have to condition the opponent and read the opponent in order to make any of these moves useful. At a more basic level though, what we're doing with these moves is we're trying to just condition the opponent to do something so we can respond with another move. If we do, for example, the 1 and they start down jabbing, then we have the 3 to be able to counter the down jab. If they're not blocking, then we have the 4 to be able to stop them from blocking, etc, etc. But the actual mix-up that you get out of horse stance isn't very good, because the only move that you can really hit the opponent with is the 1+2. Again, -1 on hit, launch punishable on block, only launches on counter hit. So the utility of the move is going to be more as a counter hit launcher if they're trying to interrupt you with a 10 frame move. Sorry, I was about to say 10 string, but a 10 frame move. If they thought you were going to do, for example, the 3, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it as low. It's just that it seems bad because the actual use case for it is a little bit more niche, and this makes it very difficult to actually apply horse stance, especially at a beginner level. So if you're newer to the character and you're not quite sure where to go with horse stance, my recommendation is to go horse into 1 to try catching them hit jabs, horse into 1+2 for the low, although it's not very good, and then a horse 3 for the mid. That would be my recommendation at a very, very basic level. If you know that the opponent is really turtling up and not blocking, then you can go for the 4. That's the most basic way that I believe you can utilize this stance, and that should still work at most levels of play. And again, if you want a more in-depth guide on how to utilize horse stance more effectively, some more advanced level ideas, feel free to look at the video in the description where I talk about just that. So another thing that you can do after forward 2 specifically, so not even talking about the stance, but this does apply for the other stances as well, I just want to talk about forward 2 because it's relevant right now, it's just waiting. You can do forward 2, and if the opponent is turtling up, like I was saying with the 4, then what you can do is forward 2 and then house sweep. Or forward 2 into another forward 2. Or forward 2 into back 1. Or forward 2 into, well, not that, but into down 2. How do you do this? You cancel the stance by pressing back. You can see when I go into stance, I can actually delay my move quite a bit. But if I hold back, then it'll immediately cancel the stance, and then I can do the move, and I won't get, like, 2 for trying to do down 2 here. I think this is very, very important for Lidia as a way to be able to open up the opponent more and make them react to the horse stance more, because since the mix-up in here isn't actually that good, you have to utilize the moves you have outside of horse stance to be able to get something a little bit more effective that's going to keep the opponent on their toes. And so doing nothing and just waiting out and seeing what they do, or doing nothing into a move you have outside of horse stance, can be really, really good for that. So that's another idea you can keep in mind as well, although you have to be careful with this because you are very minus after the forward 2 is blocked. Even though it says +5 there, it takes 9 frames for Lidia to transition out of the stance, so that makes you effectively -4, and then if you do something like a back 1 at 18 frames, that means they can interrupt you with a 21 frame move. If they have a read, of course. So when you say, well, what happens if they start doing that? Well, then that's when you do like horse 1 and stuff to interrupt them. So that should give you a very basic idea on how to utilize horse stance. It is a lot to it. It's very complicated. You're not going to be able to get all of those ideas right away if you're brand new to the character. You begin with the character. You're still learning the character. It's a lot to take in, but it should give you some ideas on how to open the opponent up in the look back, some ideas on how to add layers into the mix-up or into the mind game later on as you progress with the character. Now let's talk about cat stance. I did not talk about cat stance in the last video, so all of the information I'm going to talk about cat stance is going to be, at least of right now, in this video. So I'll try to be as comprehensive as possible when it comes to cat stance. We're still trying to keep it simple for anyone who might be new or a beginner. So you have 3 different classes of moves in cat stance, and that's what makes cat stance very, very simple. Instead of all of the intricacies that you have to deal with horse stance, you have only 3 things you have to worry about. Is the opponent taking their turn or not when they block something that goes into cat stance? Are they stand blocking or are they crouch blocking? That's it. Very simple. Those are the 3 classes of moves you have to counter those options. So if they're crouch blocking, you can hit 1. If they're stand blocking, you can hit 4. And if they're taking their turn afterwards, you can hit 3. Now, 2 very important things to keep in mind when it comes to Lidia's stances. As I said before, when it comes to forward 2, Lidia takes 9 frames in order to be able to leave the stance when you press back. So she will block on frame 9, which means that when you do a move with Lidia that transitions into a stance, take whatever the frame data says, so in this case 0, subtract 8 from it, and that's how minus you are. So when it comes to hop kick, for example, it says -5, she blocks on frame 9, she's effectively -13, like every other hop kick, so she can be punished with a 13 frame move. Simple, right? But there's another layer to this that adds a little bit of complexity, because Lidia is still 0 when transitioning into the stance, which means that if she does 3 in cat stance, that is still a 13 frame move. Despite her being effectively -8, that's still 13 frames at 0. So if the opponent does something that's 14 frames or slower, cat 3 will always win. So if you're doing down forward 2 and you're waiting and you're seeing what they do and they start saying, oh, I want to take my turn with down back 3. And just to demonstrate this, I have the opponent set to do down back 3 now. So I'm just waiting. Okay, I see before in the match they do down back 3. So now I can hit 3. And that's going to give me a heat engager. So that's the first class of moves that is interrupting the turn. It's like a turn steal, and the great part about something like down forward 2 is that because it's 0 on block, if the opponent starts trying to jab you out of it because a 12 frame move or faster is going to beat the cat 3, you can just block it, right? You can just block it. You're only going to get hit if you commit to the cat 3. So if the opponent starts thinking, oh, I can interrupt it with a 12 frame punish, ha ha ha. No, now they're -13, you can punish them. And there are other moves like this as well, although I think down forward 1 is the best one. There's 3+4. There's while rising 1-2, if they block it, of course, and don't duck the high. Same with while rising 4-2. And then there's 2-2. But you notice something there. You notice that said -4, and if we go by the rule that I talked about before, that means this is actually -12 on block high. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that, did you? This move is actually punishable. It's -12. Most people don't know this, but this move can indeed get punished. That's what makes doing 2-4 as he pokes something that some Lidia players go to. 1-2-2 as well, -8. This is launch punishable on block. Hop kick, as we talked about before, is -13. So you have to be aware of the moves that transition into cat and just how punishable they actually are. Especially if you do something like hop kick, you don't want to be doing 3 after this, because then if they're like, oh, I'm just going to launch it, and then they launch you for it, it doesn't actually, your 3 doesn't actually work. Because since you're -5, you're doing a 13 frame move, you can do the math. If they do a launcher, then you just lose with the math. It's the same with the rest of these moves as well, including 2-2. You do 2-2 into 3, and you're already -4. You're doing a 13 frame move, a 16 frame move, a launcher, will beat it. So you have to be very aware of the frame data in that case. So as a beginner, my main recommendation is down forward 2. Down forward 2 is a very powerful 15 frame move. It's 0 on block, so it allows for you to apply this mind game. On counter hit, it gives you Cat 3 guaranteed for a heat engager, which is very strong. And because of the whole dynamic I just talked about, even on block, it's still going to give you some sort of advantage. There's still something that you can capitalize on this move on block. If the opponent is just stand blocking, now we can get into the other two types of moves. You can do the low, right? And then that's going to put you in wolf stance, and then that's going to allow for another mix-up. If they're crouch blocking, then that's going to allow you to do the mid and knock them down. And then, as we talked about, if you just want to do down forward 2 into nothing and just wait them out and see what they do, which I really recommend just to kind of get an idea on how they're playing and how to best apply these options, then that's perfectly valid as well, because the move isn't punishable. It's not punishable for not doing anything in the stance. It makes it a fantastic option for trying to apply the actual cat stance and the options out of cat stance effectively. And then of course on hit it's plus 11. So if you do the 1 here, you can see that it'll beat armor. So that's a very powerful thing that you get out of here. If the 4 hits, then you get full combo. That's not the right combo. There you go. That's, of course, very powerful. And then if you do the 3, then that also works. So it just opens up every single possible option for you. They have to take the mix-up when that hits. It makes down forward 2 a very, very, very good option. And now there's one elephant in the room we need to talk about. What about sidestepping? How does it work to beat sidestepping with cat stance? Because unlike horse stance, where she has some obvious homing moves to beat it, cat stance doesn't have anything. And the unfortunate truth is, you don't really have much, but you do have some options. So of course, one thing is that on hit, they're not going to be able to sidestep stuff. See, it's just they don't have the frames to be able to actually sidestep. Maybe Lily can, I don't know. I honestly should have probably labbed it before recording this, but I didn't. But as you can see, they can't, at least most characters aren't going to be able to sidestep anything after this hits. So you don't have to worry about too much on hit. It's going to be more so on block. If I do the 1 here, you're going to see that that absolutely just completely whiffs. If I do 2 here, this is going to whiff. If I do 1 plus 2, this is going to whiff. If I do 3, this is going to whiff. And now all of a sudden we start to see some of the problems with forcing this on block. And that's again like forward 2 when I mentioned that, why it's important to sometimes just wait and then do stuff outside of the stance to try eliciting your response. Because if the opponent starts sidestepping, you can do back 1. Because back 1 realigns after a sidestep if you delay it a little bit. You'll see that even if the opponent's side walking right, which is Lydia's weak side, the back 1 is going to realign. So being able to utilize your moves outside of stance as well is going to be very vitally important. I mean, even doing a core circle forward 4, for example, is going to be good. But then we also, as I accidentally just showed, have options out of wolf stance. If we delay the wolf stance slightly, then the wolf stance is going to realign with the opponent, and then we're going to be able to get the wolf mix-up. And the opponent, when they sidestep here, is using their turn to sidestep. And that's leaving them open to this mix-up. If we do it too early, though, then we're just going to go past them. So we have to be very mindful of that. Slight delay before going in the wolf, and then we get the wolf mix-up. And then last but not least, there's 4. Now, some characters can sidestep this. I know Lily can. I believe Elisa can. There are a couple of characters that can sidestep this, but most characters aren't going to be able to sidestep this. The 4 is actually going to be your main tracking option against sidestep when you go in the wolf stance. If you notice someone sidestepping or step guarding over and over again every time you do down forward 2 and cat, then 4 is going to be your best bet to be able to catch them. And again, that's going to put you in wolf, and that's going to be able to give you the wolf mix-up. And then lastly, let's talk about wolf. Wolf is going to be very very simple. So Wolf, you have 3 options. You have the low, you have the mid, and you have the plus on block mid. One thing you have to keep in mind with this is that most of the time when you go into Wolf, you're going to be doing it off of either Cat 4 or Horse 4. So remember, the 4 button puts you in Wolf. Way to remember it, Wolf has 4 letters in it. I don't know. Some people remember better that way. Wolf has 4 letters, you go into it with the 4 button. There's only one move that Lidia has outside of stances that transitions into Wolf stance, and that's core circle forward 1+2, 2. It's Red Poppy, Poland's national flower. This move does transition into Wolf stance, but it's -14 on block. As you can see here, applying the same logic from before, -6, subtract 8 from that, it's -14. So you gotta be very careful if you do that. I personally don't use it a lot neutral. I think the move's good, and I should experiment with it more, but I don't use it because it's -14, so I'm not going to talk about this move too much, because I think for most people, you just shouldn't worry about using this move at all, because the application for it with how punishable it is going to be a lot more advanced than the other moves we're talking about, and I think it's outside of the scope of this video. So, mainly what we're going to talk about here is, again, Horse 4 and Wolf 4. So, one important thing to keep in mind is if either of these moves hit, well, I mean, if Horse 4 hits, or, sorry, if Horse 4 is blocked, or Cat 4 hits, then they cannot sidestep the low or the mid. Lily can, though, because of course she can, but the follow-up here cannot be sidestepped. This 4, which a lot of people think can be sidestepped, cannot be sidestepped. As you can see, it's just enough to be able to home in on the opponent and clip them while they're sidestepping. So on block here on this +8, in most matchups, it's going to track. Same with the 2. So you get an actual mid-low mix-up. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay, there's a slight but. And this is the but. And I don't know why this is a thing. I don't think this should be a thing. I think this is quite dumb. I think that these 2 moves should be +10 because of that. This just shouldn't exist. But this is a thing that exists now. So you have to be very mindful of armor in this case, and it's going to dissuade you from just forcing the Wolf mix-up all the time, because while the 2 here should be safe at -7, it's actually not. If the opponent gets a read on it, then they can armor through you and actually punish you for knowing that you're going to do the 2. And if you do the 4, this is launch punishable, and of course, for some reason, it leaves you -7 on hit, and it does nothing on counter hit, as you can see. So the low will go through the armor, but the only reward you're getting out of that read is an extra 2 damage. So this is especially powerful for opponents that have a high heat engager on move like Azusana and Victor. The other thing is the 1. So this is going to be a plus on block move, it's +7. In heat, this is going to put you into heaven and earth, which is very, very powerful. Right? But this not only also gets beaten by armor, but it also gets beaten by sidestep. Now, when you do Cat 4, they can only sidestep when they're on player 2 side. If they're on player 1 side, specifically after Cat 4, they actually cannot sidestep this, because when you're crouching, you can only sidestep into the background, and Cat 4 forces crouch. So you can see that I still have the opponent set to sidestep right, but the 1 hits. So it's only steppable if the opponent is on player 2 side. If you're playing online, it's obviously impossible to know if the opponent is on player 2 side or not. Chances are, of course, that on player 1 side, just like you, it's about a 90% chance that that's going to be the case. But it's something to keep in mind, is that is steppable in both cases, but only if they're on player 2 side. Harada, please fix. So what's the application for the 1 then? If it can be armored through, it can be sidestepped, and you have this one anyway to be able to hit them. Well, there are 2 reasons. The first reason is that this is going to give you a guaranteed forward 1+2 afterwards for 44 damage. So the damage outside of the wall is going to be a lot more significant than 2. It's going to be doing more than double the damage of 2. Now at the wall, the 2 is going to be better because of the wall splat. So you're going to use it when you think the opponent is going to crouch for the 4. That's the main purpose. The 2 you're going to throw out more as a safe option, and for me, I mainly use it when I think the opponent's going to sidestep to catch sidesteps, because after the 4 here, this is pretty much always going to catch sidesteps, as you can see here from the demonstration. So I'm actually using it more as a homing move than anything, and I'm using the 1 more as a way to catch opponents that are both crouching and not doing armor move or sidestep and just turtling up, being defensive and sort of waiting, because as we talked about before, if they keep doing armor moves or they keep trying to do something, then I can do like this and then just block and wait for their armor move, and their armor move is punishable. I can punish it. And so that's going to potentially make them just stand, block, and wait. And if they do that, that's when you can throw the 2 out. And the 2 is going to give you +2, which is going to allow you in some cases to be able to continue your pressure, although you're not going to be able to continue it in a huge way, but you still can. But the real benefit from this is having an earth stance, which we can talk about now. So this is going to put you on block at no charge at +10. And +10 is going to be the sweet spot for Heaven and Earth, because we have 3 moves in Heaven and Earth to talk about. We have 2, we have 1+2, and we have 1. Now, the reason why +10 is the sweet spot for being in Heaven and Earth is because the 2 is 13 frames. Now, the 2 can be sidestepped. For example, if I do running 1 into 2, you can see that it can be sidestepped right. However, if I do something that's +10, the 2 cannot be sidestepped, making this into a force block, unless the opponent has a 3-frame parry, which the characters like Jin does and Raven, and it's really stupid when that happens. But for most levels, this is not going to be relevant at all, so you don't have to worry about it. So what makes something like Wolf 1 so good is because of that +10, we get this 2 practically guaranteed on block. And if we're getting this 2 guaranteed on block, look at the chip damage. We're doing 9 + 3 + 14. So if you do the math, that's 26 chip damage for doing this. Chip damage. So you're doing more than Lydia's Hell Sweep, her down back 3 on block, which is just absolutely bonkers. And this is why I came up with a tech that I call Hammer Tech, because a great part about Lydia's kit is her ability to safely convert block damage while in heat. I was about to say Horse 2. This Heaven and Earth 2 doing so much chip damage, along with all of her other transitions doing so much chip damage that go into Heaven and Earth, means that she is able to dish out a ton of damage for the opponent blocking. So if you can throw out things like this into this, then that's just going to rack up chip damage. If the opponent isn't sidestepping after this 4 and they're just turtling up, then you can really make them pay for turtling up. So my opinion is that in Heaven and Earth, 2 is the go-to move. It is the best move. It is the strongest move. It gives the most versatility. It allows you to continue your pressure because it's still +6. And it does so much chip damage that it leaves you very little reason to use the other moves outside of some niche situations, which of course I'm going to talk about in this video. But as a general rule of thumb, a lot of people get caught up on being able to do the unblockable because, you know, it's an unblockable. It does 41 damage when you have 3 stacks and it seems pretty good. But the fact you can duck it and then get launched for it makes it actually kind of bad, especially considering you could just do the 2 and do half of that damage for free, still be plus, and continue your offense. So a good but basic string you could use here is, say you hit down forward 2. We'll start with that. Down forward 2, 4, 1, and then 2. And you're seeing just how much damage that did because you hit the down forward 2. And as we talked about before, if the opponent is scared of the 3, especially because you're in heat and they're just turtling up and you know that they're stand blocking, and you can do something like this, this, and then do this and go back into Heaven and Earth, and then you just get to keep going until your heat runs out. And that's what makes Heaven and Earth 2 so very strong. And if you want more information and more in-depth on how to utilize that, check out my video that's also linked in the description on hammer tech and how to utilize that. But what about the other two moves in Heaven and Earth? Because they still have a place, and they absolutely do. The unblockable is going to be great for finishing rounds. If you know that the opponent is going to stand block, then the unblockable is obviously going to be amazing for simply killing the opponent. It does come with risk, though, in that they're going to duck. And no matter how many times you use Heaven and Earth 2, from my experience, people are still going to duck just because the unblockable exists. I have played entire sets, I mean 2 out of 3 games where it's gone to final round in 3rd game, never used the unblockable once in the entire match, and they have still ducked for the Heaven and Earth 2. And these are at God ranks. So the sheer fact that the unblockable exists means that the opponent is going to crouch. There's no real way to be able to condition people to not duck for the unblockable, because people are kind of stupid and they think that they know you better than you know yourself. So again, you have to have a really good idea on if the opponent is going to duck or not. You have to be really careful when using the unblockable because it's so risky to do, but its ability to close out rounds is very good. The other thing that the unblockable is very good for is catching sidestep. So I showed you before how if I do the 1 here, that's going to lose to sidestep. However, if I do the unblockable, oh god. However, if I do the unblockable, that actually catches sidestep. It's basically a homing move. So if you see the opponent sidestepping a lot, the unblockable is great for that. Now, another thing here is the 1. So as you can see, if I immediately do the 1 here after running 1, then it's going to get sidestep. If I give it a slight delay though, then it's actually going to realign in combo. So, but it is -11, so you have to be careful of that. There are also going to be some situations where the opponent wants to take their turn because they're more knowledgeable after you transition into Heaven and Earth stance. So if I do running 1 into 2 here, you can see that the opponent's going to armor through it. However, if I delay the 1 here, then that's actually going to be able to go through the armor, and it's again going to be in full combo. And that's just off of armor. You can also imagine how that's going to work if someone tries jab interrupting you there. The armor is going to go right through it, and then it's going to kill them. The other great part about Heaven and Earth is that it has a parry state. So if I do 1 + 2 here, which transitions in, I'm only +1. But because of the parry state, if they try jabbing, then I'm actually going to be able to beat their jab and then get a little bit more meter back to be able to continue my pressure. It actually gives me just enough time where if I'm on a pixel of heat after doing something and I get a parry, it gives me just enough time to be able to heat dash or heat smash, as we'll show here. As you can see, I went all the way down to 0, but that parry gives me just enough to be able to heat smash or to be able to do, say, back 1 in the heat dash, or just something after doing Heaven and Earth 2, which makes the parry not only be able to avoid you getting punished, but also continue extending your pressure after you do the Heaven and Earth 2. Now, what about the transitions into Heaven and Earth? So the transitions in the Heaven and Earth, you have 3 that you can just do in neutral. There's while running 1, which is going to leave you +5, which means you can get interrupted with an armor move if you do the fastest move, which is a 3. If they do that, then you can just go through it with unblockable. If they do unblockable, then they can jab through it. So there are a couple of problems with that. However, one thing you can do is you can cancel the stance by holding back. So if they try jab interrupting you, you can do this, and then simple down forward 2, and that's going to interrupt the jab. Now, if they do an armor move, that's going to lose to arm move, as you can see here, but that's what we have forward 2 for, because that's actually going to be able to break through armor. And if you have the execution for it, the forward 2 will actually beat jab and armor at +6. However, it's tricky because forward inputs cannot be input buffered, so it becomes a 2-frame link. So it is very execution heavy, and it's not something you're going to really worry about as a beginner. However, it is still very good in those situations. So if you notice the opponent doing stuff like that, then doing forward 2 is very good. The other move that you have is 1 + 2. So 1 + 2 has 3 charges. it has one charge, which leaves you at +1, which is going to give you very little headway to be able to go through things. But again, the 1 can go through the armor. You can also just opt to do nothing, and then if they do an armor move, then you can punish it. It has a second stage charge, that leaves you +10, which, as I talked about before, is going to allow you to go through anything with the Heaven and Earth 2. And then it has a third stage charge, which leaves you +15, which is so plus that the punishment recording couldn't actually recognize that it could do an arm move in between there, so it was forced to block the 2. And you can see the chip damage here is 16 +3 +14. So that is 33 chip damage. Absolutely crazy for that being on block. Another great thing about this is you can actually cancel out of it. So if you want to just do this to threaten and then dash up on the opponent and then immediately block, then you won't actually get counter hit for being this move. While you're charging the move, you can be counter hit, but if you cancel out of it, then you won't be counter hit at all. And then lastly, honorable mention, forward 4-2. Forward 4-2 on normal hit gives you the same properties as counter hit, which allows you to go into Heaven and Earth. And that's +8, so again, it's going to go through armor. And then if that 2 hits at the wall, it's going to give you absolutely bonkers damage. And then finally, you can transition into Heaven and Earth from your stances. And one of the great parts about this whole dynamic is that it actually makes you less punishable. Lidia goes into Heaven and Earth stance and parries on frame 5. So remember before what I said, where if you do like down 4-2, for example, it takes her 9 frames to be able to transition. Well, now it's 5. So whatever that punishment was from before the stances, you subtract 4 from that. So that means if Lidia does hop kick, for example, and transitions into Heaven and Earth, all of a sudden it's safe. I have the opponent set up here to do just a 10 frame punish, but no, going into Heaven and Earth gives me the parry now when I'm in heat, which means that hop kick is safe. With an asterisk. There is a big asterisk here. The asterisk is that because Lidia is in a parry state when going into Heaven and Earth, that means grabs are guaranteed. So if the opponent has a read that I'm going to do hop kick into Heaven and Earth, then this grab is a punish. So it's not free. There is counterplay. And the other thing, because hop kick is -13, if I don't go into stance here and I hit a fastest button 3, that's going to counter hit. If I just block or try crouching, I have to deal with the grab anyway. So you have to be able to deal with the grab mix-up. That said, you can still break the grab, and if the opponent is going for grab, that is going to make hop kick safer. Definitely. But it's something to be aware of if you're transitioning into the stance, that the grab's going to be guaranteed, and that's going to make it really, really tough if you're playing against a character like Law, for example, that has a launch and grab, because then that launch and grab is just going to kill you. This is also true of other moves as well. So like, for example, forward 4-2 into Heaven and Earth. I can get grabbed out of it as a punish, but because this is +5 on block instead of the -13 like before, I have options to be able to counter grab, right? I could do the 3, I could do the 2, the 1, I could do 1 + 2, I could do 2 into heat dash, right? Or just 2 by itself and then transition into Heaven and Earth that way. So I have a lot of options to be able to deal with grab otherwise, right? If I do down 4-2 and they do grab, I can do 4 to be able to avoid it. Unfortunately, that's the only move that's actually able to avoid grab in cat stance, but it is still a move that you have. You can also duck it, right? Because you're not -13. You leave the stance at frame 9, so that gives you enough time to be able to duck and punish a grab if you have a read that the opponent is going to do that. Or if you think that they're just not going to do that at all and they're going to turtle up, then you can go into Heaven and Earth, right? And then you can force the mix-up from here off of these moves on block. So it's adding yet another layer to your mix-up, especially after something like forward 2, and it makes this move an actual threat, not only because of the natural transition to Heaven and Earth on normal hit while in heat, but also just the fact that you get this whole mix-up from Heaven and Earth stance. So that's basically going to do it for this video. Unlike the other Lidia videos I've done, I'm doing this in one take just to get it out there and have a video for you guys, because you've been asking for this for a while and I don't want to spend days trying to make sure I get it absolutely perfect. A lot of you have said that I should just be putting out videos a little bit more frequently and a little bit faster because you want more Lidia tech. So I'm going to try doing that for this video. I hope you found it as helpful as the other ones. There's going to be no example game for this one just because the topic of today's video is so broad and there are too many advanced concepts when it comes to the higher level gameplay at Tekken God Supreme that it's difficult to articulate everything that's going on in a more beginner friendly way. And I think that what's talked about in this video is more than enough to be able to convey to you how you can be utilizing these stances. So I hope you learned something from this. If there's anything I missed or you have any questions on Lydia's stances, please feel free to leave them in the comment section and I will do my best to get to all of your questions and answer them. I hope you learned something from this video. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.